What just happened to all of you? It's about to get worse.
Joanna, we know you've spoken with the baptizer.
John, something's happening. John, there's a plot. They're going to kill you.
When Jonathan Roumie first stepped into the sandals of Jesus, no one could have predicted just how deeply the role would affect him. Season after season, he's poured himself into every miracle, every parable, every whispered prayer. But as The Chosen enters its darkest and most emotionally devastating chapter, Season 5, something has shifted. The weight is no longer just emotional, it's physical, spiritual, unrelenting. Jonathan isn't just tired, he's unraveling. In recent interviews and behind-the-scenes whispers, we've learned that the pressure of portraying Jesus during the final days, Gethsemane betrayal, trial, crucifixion is unlike anything he's faced before. There's a reason fans felt something different in his performance lately, because it's not just acting anymore. Jonathan has admitted, with trembling honesty, that sometimes he feels like he's not worthy of the role. That even as he speaks, words from scripture lines that have echoed through history, he questions if he should be the one saying them. That spiritual self-doubt, that internal tension, has reached a breaking point. There was one day on set, during the filming of a major Season 5 moment, where Jonathan suddenly stopped mid. His breathing became heavy, his hands shook. And then he turned to Dallas Jenkins, the creator and director, and quietly said, "Can we stop?" Not because he needed a break, but because the weight of what he was portraying, the emotional torment of Jesus in his final hours, was simply too much. The crew watched in silence. This wasn't a meltdown. This was something sacred being broken wide open. Jonathan wasn't just stepping into a character, he was stepping into agony. He later confessed that he felt spiritually disturbed, that he couldn't sleep for days after filming that scene, that he felt like he'd touched something too sacred to leave behind. And it's not just one moment, it's been building. Every episode, every step closer to the cross, Jonathan feels the pressure mounting. He said that sometimes, before even saying a single word on set, he's already crying. Not because the script calls for it, but because his soul is shaken. His heart is too full. There's no emotional barrier anymore between him and the role. The camera might stop, but the pain lingers. And as fans, we can feel it too. We watch his eyes. We hear the tremble in his voice. And we know it's real. What we're witnessing isn't just performance, it's surrender. And that surrender has taken a toll. Jonathan has described coming home from set and sitting in silence for hours, unable to speak, unable to function. He said, "It's like something was taken out of me." That's not fatigue. That's spiritual exhaustion. And the heartbreaking part is he keeps going anyway. He's admitted that he sometimes doubts whether he'll be able to finish the season, that the emotional collapse is so intense, he fears he might not have the strength to see it through. But he keeps coming back. Not because it's easy, not because he feels ready, but because he knows this story matters. He knows that someone, somewhere, is watching and feeling closer to God because of the work he's doing. That's what drives him forward. But the costs, it's only getting higher. And with each scene that brings us closer to Gethsemane, to the betrayal, to the cross, the man behind Jesus is being pushed to the edge. Jonathan Roumie is breaking. And Season 5 might be the season that breaks him completely. Jonathan Roumie never set out to become a symbol of faith. He was an actor, struggling like so many others, praying for clarity, for purpose, for something meaningful. And then The Chosen happened. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. But no one warns you what a calling might cost. As Season 5 began filming, Jonathan found himself stepping into scenes that weren't just dramatic, they were sacred. The kind of moments that shake the soul. And the more sacred they became, the more they stripped him down. He said he felt like something inside him was being peeled away, layer by layer, until all that remained was a man staring into the face of something too big to hold. During one key scene leading up to the Last Supper, John confessed that he could feel a weight on his chest before he even stepped onto the set. He couldn't explain it. He just felt heavy, like I was carrying something invisible. He said, and when the director called to action, he moved, spoke, breath, but it wasn't easy. It was like pushing through spiritual quicksand. Every line felt like a whisper through grief. Every pause was a cry for strength. And when the scene ended, he didn't move. He just stood there staring, unable to speak. Crew members exchanged looks but said nothing. Because by now, they knew Jonathan was not okay. He's talked openly about what happens after filming ends each day. How he goes home and often sits in silence, sometimes in the dark, trying to process the weight of what just happened. "It doesn't leave me," he said. "I take it home." His voice sometimes breaks when he says it. He admits that the sadness from scenes doesn't feel like acting anymore. It feels like memory, like something he lived through, not just portrayed. And this emotional residue doesn't fade quickly. On one especially difficult night after filming a scene depicting Jesus' final moments with the disciples, Jonathan said he couldn't sleep at all. Not for minutes, not for hours. He just lay there, eyes wide, soul unsettled. I felt like I was still there, he said, still in that room, still holding their pain. That's the difference with The Chosen. It doesn't give its cast an easy way out. There's no emotional detachment, no protective layer between the role and reality. For Jonathan, especially in season 5, the pain of Jesus is becoming his own. And what's even more haunting is that he questions every single day whether he's doing it right. I still feel unworthy, he confessed. Even after all these years. Maybe even more now. That doubt, that crushing whisper that he's not enough is louder than ever. And it doesn't go away just because fans adore him or because the world sees him as the face of Jesus. In fact, that global recognition makes it worse. Because now, the pressure is unbearable. Every look, every line, every pause, millions are watching, judging, believing, and Jonathan feels all of it. He says he prays constantly, not for the show's success, but for strength, for peace, for the ability to keep going. Because more than once, he's questioned whether he can. More than once, he's reached the point where the emotional toll has become too high. There are days where just reading the script makes him cry, not because the writing is sad, but because the burden is so real. And it's that spiritual vulnerability that makes his performance so powerful, because it's not pretend, it's personal. Dallas Jenkins, the creator, has shared glimpses of what it's like working with Jonathan during these scenes. He said there are moments on set where the atmosphere shifts, where everyone grows quiet, not out of professionalism, but reverence. Because they can tell Jonathan isn't acting. He's suffering, he's surrendering, he's bleeding into the story. And in those moments, even the crew finds themselves moved to silence or even tears. That's how deep the connection has become between the man and the role. But as beautiful as it is, it's dangerous too. Because there's a cost to carrying that kind of pain day after day. And Jonathan is feeling it more than ever. He's admitted that some days he wishes he could step away. Just for a while, just to breathe. But the story won't let him. The role keeps pulling him back. And with each step closer to the crucifixion, the pain only grows. Jonathan Roumie is not just portraying the suffering of Jesus. He's feeling it, absorbing it. And the deeper he goes, the harder it is to find his way back. Jonathan Roumie's pain wasn't just spiritual, it was physical. After filming some of the most emotionally devastating scenes of season 5, especially the Garden of Gethsemane sequence, his body began to shut down. The weight of portraying the Son of God in his final moments, betrayed, abandoned, and left to suffer alone, was too much for Jonathan to carry without breaking. Reports from set insiders revealed that Roumie had to stop mid-shoot and sit in silence for hours, unable to speak, unable to move. Not because he didn't want to continue, but because something inside him had collapsed. The line between actor and character had completely vanished. Jonathan wasn't just playing Jesus anymore. He was feeling everything, every lash, every tear, every scream of the soul that came with knowing your death is near and your friends are gone. This wasn't acting. This was bleeding. His co-stars noticed the shift too. One crew member whispered, "He didn't come back from that scene for days. It was like we lost him." Behind the scenes, Jonathan had become quieter, more withdrawn. Between shoots, he used to share jokes, pray with the crew, and offer encouragement. But now, after Gethsemane, he barely made eye contact. His voice was hoarse, his body stiff with tension, and he often stayed in his trailer long after filming wrapped. People assumed he was just tired, but it was more than that. He was exhausted on a soul level. The pain he poured into those moments wasn't temporary. It stuck to his bones. Even when cameras stopped rolling, the grief lingered. The sorrow of being rejected, the heartbreak of being misunderstood, the agony of impending sacrifice, all of it lived inside him. And when the time came to film the trial before the Sanhedrin, Jonathan's health reportedly faltered. His heart was racing. His breathing became erratic. And the director made a hard decision. Stop filming. Now, for the first time in the show's production, everything halted. Not because of logistics or weather, but because the man playing Jesus simply couldn't go on. And this wasn't just a moment of exhaustion, it was a breaking point. Jonathan's body was crying out. not from overwork, but from the burden of pain he willingly stepped into. It wasn't about being tired, it was about being emptied. And yet, even as he sat on the edge of collapse, Jonathan didn't ask for pity. He didn't complain. Instead, he asked for prayer. He asked his castmates and crew to pray, not for him to be strong, but to stay humble, to remain true to the pain of the character, to reflect God's heart even when it hurt. That's the kind of man Jonathan Roumie is. He breaks, but he breaks for a purpose. And then came the hardest part. Jonathan had to confront the truth. He wasn't sure if he could finish season 5. Not because he didn't believe in the mission, but because every day of filming felt like he was reliving a crucifixion of the spirit. The emotional toll of betrayal scenes, especially the moment when Judas kisses Jesus, haunted him. Not just as an actor, but as a believer. How could he go back to set knowing what lay ahead? The beatings, the humiliation, the moment when Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That line alone made Jonathan weep during rehearsals. He admitted to those closest to him that he was scared. Scared not of forgetting lines, but of feeling too deeply. Because once you've touched that kind of grief, once you've stood in the shoes of someone who gave everything and got a cross in return, there's no coming back unchanged. Asterisk, ChatGPT said. But even as Jonathan Roumie pressed forward with filming The Chosen Season 5, something deeper began to unravel, something even he could no longer hide. Behind the beard, beneath the robes, beyond the rehearsed lines of scripture, Jonathan was experiencing what he later called a personal spiritual exhaustion. Not just tiredness or stress from work. This was heavier. It was the weight of constantly portraying the most sacred, most scrutinized figure in human history. Every day on set wasn't just about acting. It was about emotionally walking into a scene that millions of people would interpret as sacred truth. That kind of responsibility doesn't just wear down the body, it tears at the soul. Jonathan has spoken about what it's like to internalize the pain, love, and burden of Jesus. But during this season, those internalizations stopped being metaphors. He felt them, and that wasn't just his opinion. People around him noticed too, his co-stars, the crew, even Dallas Jenkins. They all began to see that something was shifting. His eyes would stay glazed even after a take. His voice, once confident and peaceful, would break in the middle of sentences. There were moments he couldn't even walk back to his trailer, had to sit alone, in silence, under the burning sun, as if trying to catch his breath from carrying a world that wasn't his to carry. But maybe the scariest part was that he kept asking himself, what if I'm no longer enough for this role? That doubt, creeping in like a whisper, threatened everything he'd built. The crowds loved him, the fan mail never stopped. But inside, he was sinking. And it wasn't just about the emotional burden, it became physical. His energy plummeted. He couldn't sleep. His body stopped cooperating with him. Simple movements became exhausting. There were even rumors, never fully confirmed, that Jonathan had to be helped offset more than once. That filming had to pause. That he needed time. Not because he was difficult or dramatic, but because he was, quite literally, breaking under the weight of Jesus' story. He knew the crucifixion scene was coming. He knew Gethsemane was next. But he wasn't sure he could make it there. The mental toll of embodying a suffering Christ was no longer a performance, it was his daily reality. And fans watching the trailer closely will notice it too. There's something different in his eyes this season. A heaviness, a tremble. Not staged, not rehearsed, real. The line between Jonathan and Jesus blurred in. No one knew how much longer he could hold on. And yet, despite the exhaustion, the emotional unraveling, and the quiet breakdowns behind the scenes, Jonathan Roumie did not walk away. He could have. No one would have blamed him. Not Dallas Jenkins. Not the cast. Not even the millions of fans who call him their Jesus. But instead of stepping back, Jonathan chose something far more dangerous. He leaned in, into the storm, into the pressure, into the role that had begun to consume him. It wasn't just courage. It was surrender. Because for Jonathan, playing Jesus has never been just about acting. It's been a calling, a mission, and in season 5, that calling demanded everything. This is the season of betrayal, of pain, of the crucifixion. And that meant Jonathan had to go to darker places than he ever had before, not just on screen, but inside himself. There's a scene still unreleased that people on set say left the crew in tears. Not because of special effects or dramatic lighting, but because Jonathan didn't just act like Jesus. He became him. He wept not for the camera, not for the script. but because in that moment, he was overwhelmed by what he was representing. The weight of every sign, the loneliness of being abandoned by friends, the agony of knowing the cross was near. Some say the moment was so real, so raw, that they had to stop filming and just sit in silence. This wasn't acting anymore. This was transformation. And that transformation wasn't without cost. Jonathan reportedly began attending spiritual counseling during filming, not because he doubted his faith, but because he needed help anchoring himself as the role pulled him deeper into emotional extremes. There were whispers that he fasted before major scenes, that he spent nights alone, praying through the script, asking God not just to help him perform but to protect him. Because the further he sank into Jesus' suffering, the more he risked losing himself. And yet, that's exactly what makes Season 5 so different. It's not just a story anymore. It's an offering. Jonathan has given a piece of himself to this Season 1 he may never fully get back. When you watch the trailer, and eventually the episodes, you'll feel it. The way his voice quivers when he says, "One of you will betray me." The trembling in his hands, the silence between breaths. It's not acting, it's sacrifice. And while the audience may never truly know the emotional price Jonathan paid to carry this role, Season 5 bears the marks of that sacrifice in every scene. The crucifixion is coming. The garden is coming. But before the nails, before the blood, before the final cry, Jonathan Roumie walks a path of surrender, of darkness, of unimaginable pressure. And he walks it not for applause, not for fame, but because somewhere deep inside, he still believes that telling this story matters, that becoming Jesus, no matter how broken it leaves, him can still change lives. But the real question isn't whether Jonathan can survive this season. It's whether we, the audience, are ready to witness what he's about to show us. Because Season 5 isn't just another chapter of The Chosen, it's a turning point for Jesus, for the disciples, and for the man brave enough to play him, even as it breaks him.